Nomads are people who move from one place to the other to escape harsh weather and to find conditions suitable to earn a livelihood. There are different communities of nomadic pastoralists in India. Pastoralists are people who earn their living by raising and herding livestock. As you already know, India is made up of different kinds of geographical terrains such as mountains, plateaus, plains, and deserts. The nomads living in these different terrains follow various seasonal movements to earn their livelihood. Let's first meet some nomads living in the mountains. I am Omar, part of the Gujar Bakarwals from Jammu and Kashmir. We raise herds of goats and sheep and earn a living through our livestock. Let me tell you something interesting about us. We follow an annual cyclic movement between winter and summer for grazing grounds to find pasture for our herds. In the winter, when the mountains are covered with snow, we live in the low hills of the Siwalik range, while in the summer, several of our households journey together in a procession as a single group known as a kafila. We head upwards to the mountainside, which is lush during April. Come September, we begin our downward journey towards our winter base. Actually, we are not the only ones who have this kind of a lifestyle. My friend here is part of the Gadi shepherd tribe of Himachal Pradesh. The Gadi shepherds also use the low hills of the Siwalik as their winter base, just like us. By April, they move towards the mountains and spend the summer in Lahul and Spiti. As the snow melts, they move further up the mountains. On their return journey towards the winter base, they stop at Lahul and Spiti to reap their summer harvest and sow their winter crop. Another tribe, the Gujar cattle herders, who live further to the east in Garhwal and Kumaon, come down to the dry forests of the Bhabar in the winter and go up to the high meadows, the Bugyals, in the summer. The Sherpas, Bhotias, and Kinauris of the Himalayas are other nomadic tribes of this region. Now that we have seen nomads from the mountains, let's meet the Dhangars, who are a pastoral community of the central plateau of Maharashtra, consisting of shepherds, blanket weavers, and buffalo herders. This is an ideal place for their livestock, as sheep cannot tolerate the wet monsoon conditions. Dry crops like bajra are grown, and the area also provides a grazing ground for their flocks. After the harvest in October, they move west in search of pastures to reach Konkan. Konkan is a rich agricultural tract with high rainfall and rich soil. The Dhangars' flocks help manure the fields in Konkan to make it ready for the Rabi harvest. With the onset of the monsoon, the Dangars return to the plateau. The people of Konkan give them supplies of rice, which prove very useful on the plateau where grain is scarce. There are other pastoral communities in Karnataka and Andhra Pradesh, such as the Golas, Kurumas and Kurubas. The Golas herd cattle, whereas the Kurumas and Kurubas rear sheep and goats and sell woven blankets. In the dry season, they all move to the coastal tracts and leave when the monsoon arrives. There are other groups of grazers such as the Banjaras, who are found in Uttar Pradesh, Punjab, Rajasthan, Madhya Pradesh and Maharashtra. They move in search of pasture land for their cattle, selling plough cattle and other goods to the villagers in exchange for grain and fodder. Moving to the deserts, the Raikas are a nomadic tribe of Rajasthan. They combine cultivation with pastoralism to overcome the difficulties posed by the meagre and uncertain rainfall in the region. During the monsoon, the Raikas of Barmer, Jaisalmer, Jodhpur and Bikaner stay in their villages. By October, when the grazing grounds are dry, they move in search of other pastures and water and return during the next monsoon. There are two other groups, Maru, also known as the Desert Raikas, who herd camels, and another group who rear sheep and goat. As you can see, nomadic pastoralists adjust their movements and activities according to the surrounding conditions to make a living. Unlike mountain pastoralists, whose movement is controlled by the cold and the snow, it is the alternation of the monsoon and the dry season that governs the cyclic movements of pastoralists in the plateaus, plains, and deserts. I am a Maru Raika. Remember me? I am a nomad from the deserts of Rajasthan. My knowledge is not through textbooks, but through stories that have been passed down over centuries from one generation to the next by the word of mouth. I am here to tell you about a turbulent period in the lives of not only the Raikas, but the entire nomadic pastoralist community of India. This happened during the colonial rule of the British. The British viewed all uncultivated land as wasteland that did not earn any revenue nor render any agricultural produce, and so they passed various wasteland rules. Under these rules, several areas of uncultivated land, including many of our pastoral tracts, were taken over and given to select individuals to cultivate. Even access to forests was snatched away from us. The Forest Act was passed, under which many of the forests that produced commercial timber, like teak and sal, were marked as reserved, and we, the pastoralists, were barred from entering them. However, some forests were demarcated as protected, and only certain customary grazing rights were granted in these forests. However, our movements were greatly restricted and controlled. We were issued permits for grazing, and the time of entry and departure were strictly monitored and limited. The permit specified the periods in which we could be legally within a forest. If we overstayed, we were liable to fines. The entire nomadic pastoral community in India was facing a tough time because the British were suspicious of and distrusted us. They felt that it was easy to control and monitor a settled population living in fixed areas with particular fields. A settled population was seen as peaceable and law-abiding. So, to control the nomadic pastoralists and to immobilize them, the British passed the Criminal Tribes Act in 1871. Even without committing a single act of crime, we were identified to be criminal by nature and birth. We were expected to live in fixed notified villages under strict supervision of the village police and were allowed to move only with a permit. Our troubles did not end there. The colonial government imposed various taxes on land, canal water, salt, trade goods, and even on animals to increase its revenue. We had to pay tax on every animal we grazed on the pastures. Initially, contractors were appointed to collect the tax, but they exploited us by collecting high amounts of taxes to increase their profits. By the 1880s, the government began collecting the taxes directly from us, and a pass was issued to each pastoralist to enter a grazing tract. Even today, the elders in our community recount the stories of atrocities that their ancestors faced at the hands of the British. The British completely changed our lives and took control of our freedom of movement and our livelihood. Africa, the second largest continent in the world, with a history of colonialism like India, is also home to many pastoral communities like Bedouins, Berbers, Maasai, Somali, Boran, and Turkana. They live in semi-arid grasslands or dry deserts where agriculture is not possible. They earn a living through their livestock such as cattle, camels, goats, sheep, and donkeys by selling their milk, meat, animal skin, and wool. They also combine pastoralism with other activities such as trade, odd jobs, and agriculture. Colonialism had its harsh effects on the African pastoralists too, and changed their lives drastically. The Maasais were one such tribe living in Eastern Africa who were victims of colonial rule. One of the major changes was the loss of pastoral lands. In the pre-colonial period, Maasai land stretched from North Kenya to northern Tanzania. However, in 1885, it was cut into half when an international boundary was drawn between British Kenya and German Tanganyika. Nearly 60% of Maasai land was taken over for white settlements, and the Maasais were pushed to an arid zone with uncertain rainfall and poor pastures. Like in India, the British colonial government encouraged local peasant communities to expand cultivation, further consuming the pasture lands of the Maasai. Large areas of grazing land were converted into game reserves, like the Masai Mara National Park and the Samburu National Park in Kenya, and Serengeti Park in Tanzania. This was a source of income for the colonizers, but for the pastoralists it was another blow, as they were neither allowed to enter these reserves nor to hunt animals or graze their herds. These restrictions limited the movement of the Maasais, which in turn affected their livelihood. To make matters worse, the droughts in the years 1933 and 1934 caused immense damage to the Maasais as they lost half their livestock. The British colonists even interfered in the traditional customs of the Maasai and tried to control their society. Traditionally, Maasai society had elders who managed the affairs of the tribe, and the younger men who raided the cattle of other pastoral groups and participated in warfare. To gain control over Maasai society, the British appointed various chiefs from other subgroups and even placed restrictions on warfare and raiding. The appointed chiefs became rich by trading in the towns and lending money to the poor pastoralists at high interest rates. However, the poor pastoralists lost almost everything in times of famines and droughts. They had to work in towns, building roads and in construction, as charcoal burners or doing odd jobs, which suited the colonizers well. This also caused a huge distinction between the rich and the poor pastoralists. Despite the colonizers' attempts to control and upturn the lives of the pastoralists, they adapted themselves to the ever-changing circumstances.